I would like to introduce you to our next panel for the day, which is amazing. So wait for it. It's going to be a conversations between the creators of HBO's Bad Education. It is a beautiful film. I hope you all have seen it. If not, we will also be playing the trailer really quickly. It will be moderated by Donaldo Prescott. He's an amazing filmmaker. And the director, Corey Finlay, is in the house. And Mike McCoskey, the writer of Bad Education. So everyone, we will be playing the trailer momentarily. Have fun, and then we'll see you later. Take it away, Donaldo.
All right. Is the trailer queued up? I wanted to start.
Yeah. Why don't we start with that? I'm going to share that screen and do my best to make it look great in the Zoom era.
You look tired.
Tired as kicking my ass. I would kill somebody for a carb right now.
I don't know where you could find one.
You're such a bitch.
Oh, would you like a bite? Come on, eat the fucking sandwich.
Good morning. I wanted to make a difference. Look, we did. I got us all the way to number 4, and I will get us to number 1.
These are the best early decision numbers that we've ever seen.
They want me to write an article about the new budget.
Oh, okay. Soundbite. Nice.
You want to write this down, or you...
I'm taping.
Oh. Okay.
It's just a puff piece.
It's only a puff piece if you let it be a puff piece.
Come.
What?
Quick.
This is a very real crime here, a theft of taxpayer money.
The sum total is $250,000.
What?
Oh,
Jeez,
$250,000. Everything's fine.
You can't jump the gun here, not when there's this much at stake. We need to know what we're dealing with.
Frank.
After everything we've worked for.
Frank.
To get this far.
Frank.
You have nothing to worry about. Frank's gonna fix this.
This kind of behavior, it's cruel. It's sociopathic.
Sociopathic? I'm ashamed of my actions. I'm ashamed of myself. There's no excuse for it.
Well, the sociopathy.
Yeah, right.
If a scandal gets out, we will lose everything. Some people, they'll do the most horrible things.
All right. Awesome. All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome. Thanks for showing that trailer. I wanted that to kick it off just to have some context for anyone that probably didn't see the movie, so they had just an idea of what we will be discussing. And to add to that, just because I feel like I'm gonna be bringing it up. So with that said, real quick, I'm gonna just read the plot for the movie. So Bad Education tells the story of school district superintendent Dr. Frank Tassone, played by Hugh Jackman, and assistant superintendent Pam Gluckin, played by Allison Janney, who steal millions of dollars from the same public school district that they seek to make the best in the country. And between the two of them, it was $11 million that they embezzled, right? Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so real quick, I know we sort of did the intros. My name is Donaldo Prescott. It's a pleasure to be with the Bushwick Film Fest once again. Before we get into the questions, Corey, Mike, do y'all want to just quickly introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Corey Finlay. I am the director of Bad Education, and a real pleasure to be here too. Thank you, Donaldo, and thank you to everyone at the festival for having us.
Yeah.
And I'm Mike McCoskey. I am the screenwriter of Bad Education, and the film was also based on a school scandal that took place at my childhood school district on Long Island as a kid in 2004. So also just really, really excited to be here. Thank you guys for having both of us and for supporting the film.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing film. And with that said, that leads me to my first question, which is for you, Mike. The first thing when I saw the movie, I remember first, like I saw it on the premiere. I called up Corey. I was like, "Yo, this movie felt it like." I was like, this felt deep. I was like, "What's going on?" And then he was like, "Well, Mike's from Roslyn. He went to that school." So I was like, "Oh shit, okay." So given that, all right. So my question for you, Mike, is that being from Roslyn, attending Roslyn High, so now that you've gone through that process of writing the movie, seeing it come to fruition, having it being made, winning an Emmy, by the way, congratulations, the movie did win an Emmy this year. So another, kudos to y'all for that. Does it feel like this was like a win for your hometown, or how do you feel about that? How do you feel?
Oh, I mean, I'd like to think so. I mean, I definitely intended the film to serve, at least in part, as a love letter to my community and my upbringing, and a very, very specific kind of upbringing and culture that I think is endemic, certainly to my area on Long Island. I think, not to speak too much for my community, but I'd like to think that just from the messages that I've gotten from people back home, or former teachers or friends with whom I graduated, that they're really excited about it and proud, and it's just
Was there like a premiere, or did you guys do like a screening? Or
we were going to. We had plans to. We were actually going to play the Tribeca Film Festival, and we were going to do a local kind of hometown screening this past April that HBO was going to help us coordinate. I think at our kind of like local theater in Roslyn, but unfortunately the pandemic kind of shunted all of those plans. Which was a bummer, because I would have loved to have been able to engage on a more one-to-one level with my community. But I've been able to just, virtually through communicating with friends and former teachers, and just, reestablishing those old bonds. The film has been a really, really good excuse to reconnect with that part of my past. And my mom still lives in Roslyn. So she has been, she's also in the movie. She's an extra in the film. So like a lot of her, like people from her life have been sort of reaching out. So I hear a lot gets filtered through my mom and Facebook. So, but it's been really, really, really nice and really, really meaningful. And just a really crazy, surreal. We shot most of the film in the town too.
Wow.
Yeah, including in my mom's house, which was very, very crazy. Just I don't think I'm ever gonna have an experience quite so surreal or meaningful again. And I was fortunate that I had a director that definitely indulged in my more sentimental when I wanted to include an Easter egg to the town, or a shot of our local eatery or something. He was always down to just let me mess around a little bit.
But going into this, it's like, you got this story, it's very personal to you, and then it's like, hey, we're about to have Hugh Jackman, Alex Danny, Ray Romano, all these people, and it's just like, how does that process work? Is it like, do you reach for one of them, and then everyone else sort of is like, I'll do this, or is it sort of just
Yeah, I can take that one. Well, I think these things, you often start with the lead character. In this case, we went to Hugh. We were very lucky that he was interested in doing the film, that he was interested in the role. I think, not to speak for him, but I think it was kind of different from what he's known for. I think he's known for an enormous range. He's obviously the guy who can be both Wolverine and The Greatest Showman, and sing and have claws and everything in between. But this was like a very kind of subtle, layered, very, I think, kind of naturalistic performance, and just an amazing script by Mike. And I think he was excited to do it. And then once he came on board, I think that will often get a movie's momentum kind of rolling. And Allison came on board shortly after that, and Ray Romano, and then the rest of the cast all kind of came together pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was cool to see, because I feel like the last big thing he did was Logan. So when I saw this, I was like, we need to see more of that from Hugh, man, because that performance is just like, he knocked it out the park, and I'm so glad he was nominated because it was amazing.
Brilliant in Logan too. Just
yeah,
up to that movie. Not that it needs any. I think a few people saw that movie, but no. But he talked about kind of a layered, subtle, comparatively naturalistic superhero movie. He definitely did that, but still a big adjustment going from, you know, even a very kind of quiet toward the end of his life superhero to a New Jersey, Long Island. You know,
wow.
Sorry, don't take that person.
Driving the
to a Long Island superintendent is obviously a big shift for an actor.
Yeah. So now my next question is for the both of you. So Corey, I know this was your first time just directing, right? Not being, so this was your first one just as a director. Mike, I know you've worked with other directors. What are some of the gems, the advice you can give people out there when you're collaborating in that sense and doing a project like this?
I can just speak really quickly in terms of, I think it's always really important, you know, when you're writing something that you don't intend to direct yourself,
right,
to find a collaborator or filmmaker who really sees it the same way you do in terms of both kind of like tone and outlook and point of view and perspective. And I think Corey was just a great match and extremely generous collaborative partner who was always very respectful of my words. And you know, I think we worked hand in hand to continue developing the script once he came aboard, and it was just always a really fun process that often just involved the two of us, like at my mom's kitchen table in Roslyn, just reading the script aloud and playing all the parts and stuff. Like, it felt like a college workshop in the best possible way. It was just a format that I think, you know, felt very organic to both of us and enabled us to go through, you know, many drafts and stuff quickly and get to that place where we were both really, you know, satisfied with what we were going to shoot.
Yeah.
It was helpful for me having been on the other side of it and having, as Donaldo knows, I've come out of theater and have worked with a bunch of great theater directors and have written one screenplay for another director as well. And so I think I had some sense of, just as a writer, what's useful and what's less useful to hear from a collaborator, from a director. Obviously, it's naturally a very different just process as far as logistics and timing and what happens when from theater. But I think I did come in with that sort of, hopefully with that sort of theater-like respect for the authorial voice of the screenwriter, which is something that often gets thrown out in Hollywood. But I think with this script, it would be such a egregious sin to not respect the author's voice, because it's just such a particular voice and such a particular tone that drew me to the script. And B, obviously Mike has this really personal connection and did sort of put a lot of his heart and soul and childhood on the page. But it definitely, as Mike said, it really helps just having good collaborators that think in the same way, share a lot of instincts. I think we share a lot of favorite movies and a lot of taste elements. And so it was a really fun collaboration for sure.
Yeah, this is a very specific tone, and it's this dark comedy that treads this kind of really thin tonal tightrope. And when I wrote the script, there was I had written it on spec, and I didn't really have any grand designs for what a great director fit would look like. And then I saw Thoroughbreds, and immediately I was like, oh, this is a person who sees the world just as sort of cynically and darkly as I do, and was very fortunate that he wanted to play in that sandbox with me.
Yeah, it does have this tone of it did remind me of movies like Election, Heathers, and then it also has this feel of like some of those political dramas from like the 70s. I don't know, I kept getting that feeling with when Geraldine's character was trying to solve things out, it felt like some of those.
I definitely, that was I have that little red smudge in the background is my All the President's Men movie poster.
There we
our producers gifted me, because it was one of our key references just visually, just for kind of the prosaic reason of like, it's one of the great movies that makes a billion different, or not different, but just a whole ton of scenes that take place in like a fluorescent lit kind of office space, look really visually compelling. And it's shot on film, like all movies from that era. It's shot on 35, and we were lucky to shoot on film with our movie. And so my DP and I looked at that movie a lot, mostly as kind of a lighting and color palette reference. But yeah, I mean, Mike, was that movie, or was the kind of tradition of like 70s like conspiracy movies and journalism thrillers like in your mind with that character? I don't think we've ever talked about that.
Yeah, I think I know visually I was a fly on the wall for some of the conversations that you and Lyle, your DP, had, and I don't remember, was it specifically All the President's Men, or was it scenes from the Parallax? I think it was all of the above, right? It was just all of those movies. You were kind of, I definitely watched All the President's Men and Election, like you said, while I was writing this. There's another film about journalism called Shattered Glass. It was a Billy Ray movie from 2003, starring Hayden Christensen in his one great role. And about this journalist at the National Review named Stephen Glass, who was a serial plagiarist, and basically the whole film is his colleague's investigation by which he was ultimately discovered, and him just kind of lying and dissembling his way out of it and manufacturing more untruths in order to mask his own culpability. And from a journalist's perspective, I was definitely using that as a reference point, I think, more for Frank, and I think definitely the Woodward Bernstein, William Goldman, All the President's Men references for Rachel as this crusading journalist who I think treads that line between the, like you say, the Woodward and Bernstein and the Tracy Flick on the other end of the spectrum, and kind of merging and fusing those two characters and finding, or those two personas, and finding a kind of happy medium that would, hopefully bring something that people haven't quite seen before.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like her and her dad sort of take on that role, because I just love those scenes when it's just the two of them sitting around trying to put it together. And it's
at my mom's house on Long Island, my child. For all the interiors, yeah,
that's awesome. I love that. So this is, I'm glad I get to ask this question, because I've always thought about this for movies that are based on real life events. But when working on a story like this, I mean, you obviously can't get into all the details. You could almost make this a series. So how does it? What stays, what goes? What are the things you're thinking about? Like, I got to get this in there, maybe not this. Was there a lot of that conversation happening?
Totally. And I think, even as we were nearing production, and even in post-production, there were certain things that we needed to call out, certain truths of the chronology, or condensing timeline in interesting ways. The real events unfolded over the course of a year and a half, and instead we just had to take place over the course of one school year, just for simplicity's sake. The student journalist is both composite and invention, even though the student journalists at the Hilltop Beacon, our school newspaper, were the first journalistic outlet to break the case. The method of investigation is slightly different, and there's one component, specifically this anonymous letter that circulated throughout our community, that was kind of the smoking gun in a lot of ways that propelled the investigation forward, that we shot. Corey made 10-15 minutes of. Like, we actually did shoot it, and found very quickly, and Corey can maybe speak to this too, that it wasn't tracking in quite an organic enough way. It felt like it was a couple of steps too complicated, and for simplicity's sake, we streamlined the narrative in a way that, to most viewers outside of Roslyn, would not bump, but if you lived through the scandal, you're like, where's the anonymous letter? So it's you're constantly sort of negotiating what to keep and what to sort of concoct in order to, because at the end of the day, you're making a narrative film. It's not a documentary, and certain liberties have to ultimately be taken in service of that goal. And I'm sure Corey can speak to that even better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to add to that. I just think one of the interesting things for people that are looking up the real details of the story after the movie is that I think a lot of the most, the seemingly craziest parts of the story were the most heavily researched and the most specifically close to real life. And a lot, just Mike's script does such a good job of taking some of the more insane details of the purchases of these characters. And, you know, there are places where it's like extremely granularly accurate. There's in Hugh's monologue, he talks about, what was it, 15-cent bagel? How many cents was the bagel?
Oh, I had a 6-cent bagel. Yeah. So there's, there's definitely a lot of the charges I tried to keep really true. You know, there was a sort of itemized breakdown from the state auditor or the state controller after the fact that I relied pretty heavily on, and even just the mechanics by which Pam Gluckin's initial $250,000 were discovered because her son was spending a bunch of money at hardware stores all around Long Island, and a suspicious clerk notified his boss, who then notified the school board. Like, all that is true. Like him, you know, her agreeing to retire under the rugs, and then, you know, a wide swath of time occurring in between, but where the board elected not to report the scandal to the community. Like, that's all true. Frank Tassone's, you know, it's yeah. I think that the most surreal parts of the story, I think the parts that people, like Corey said, would assume didn't happen, were the ones that, you know, were stranger than fiction, like just had to be true. Otherwise, you wouldn't have wedged them in there.
Mm-hmm.
And given that this is a story where a lot of these people are still around, like, I remember watching it and then being like, is Frank still in prison? And then going online and it's like, he's out, he's free, he's, you know, even had some feedback for the I don't know if you saw it, but like, did you guys feel any need to reach out to some of the bigger ones?
Well, we definitely thought about it, and I think ultimately my you know, I think it's always a sort of a morally complicated question with true stories, the degree to which you include real people. I think there are movies that have sort of erred in both directions. There can be obvious sort of moral dangers about not consulting the real people. I think there can sometimes also be moral dangers in consulting the real people. And I remember from my brief dalliance with journalism in college that one of my teachers just memorably said that an important thing for journalists always to keep in mind is that your first duty is to your reader, to your audience, not to your subject, and not to be sort of captured by your subjects. So ultimately, I decided we didn't want Frank to be involved in the movie. We also didn't want I didn't want the Roslyn School District involved in the movie. I feel like obviously those two parties, this was a you know, very embarrassing episode in both of those parties' lives. The school district has a life, but in the figurative sense, but also two people that had very conflicting opinions of one another, and that I imagine would want to steer the portrayal toward one way or another. And, you know, we were not ultimately making a movie that wants to heroize Frank. We're not making a case like some movies do that sort of this character has been fundamentally misunderstood and needs to be redeemed. We also weren't making a movie specifically indicting the Roslyn School District. But with that said, we wanted freedom to walk this very careful line where we were honest about kind of the bad things that had been done in this real situation, not letting anyone off the hook, but also I was confident sort of morally that we were not making a movie that was like laughing at people or villainizing people, right, or just turning people into caricatures. I really tried to make it as sympathetic a film as possible. And I think that was true of Mike's script from the beginning. And he could speak to this, but I think it kind of came out of an impulse to not to necessarily redeem this figure from his childhood, but to investigate him more deeply than the very, very negative, very kind of cartoonish coverage at the time had done.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he was largely misunderstood, or at least sort of not depicted in the fairest light possible. Back in 2004, not necessarily even by our local news, but by certain other outlets out there that you know, sort of unfairly or grotesquely conflated details of his personal life with his crime, and ways that, you know, hopefully would never happen today in a mainstream journalistic outlet. But yeah, no, you know, for me, the guy was the boogeyman. He was the villain of my childhood. You know, he had stolen $11 million from our community. He and his cohorts had stolen $11 million from my community. It was the biggest and most notorious thing that ever happened in my hometown. It was a really, really, really touchy subject, but people, I had been so conditioned to hate this man, and upon learning more about him, both as an educator and these shades of his personal life, and it made me, not necessarily sympathize with him, like I'm going to go out and steal $11 million, but certainly I think to empathize with him and his situation, it's just kind of try to negotiate and find that window of empathy and understanding was a really kind of important part of the journey of writing and making this film.
Yeah. Real quick, I just wanted to, because I just got to notice that we can go till 4. So I don't know if you guys have a heart out or anything like that, but
we're all stuck in
we're hanging out. Yeah, we're quarantining. Yeah. Please.
Good. Yeah, I know.
As long as you'll have us. Yeah.
This is great. This is good, because it had me thinking about other stuff, because one of the things that watching the film, I was like, and it's mentioned a few times where you guys, where it's mentioned about like sociopath and being, and watching the movie, I was like, their actions did seem that way, but the biggest thing, and you nailed it, was his resentment towards just, it's like he had this, persona of like presenting himself to be this very well put together, loving everything about the school, but then deep down it seemed like he just has so much resentment. Because I always think about, like, when it comes to embezzlement, I'm like, you're gonna get caught at some point. I don't know, it's just one of those things where it's like, what's driving that for these guys, or for him, for her, for Frank and Pamela? But can you guys just talk about that, so to as far as
well, I think
is that
one way to speak to that is, I think, I wanted the movie to play out as kind of a, to really keep the viewer like active in a way and engaged in this kind of mystery, a number of different mysteries, right? There's sort of the mystery of like what's going on, the mystery that we're following along with the student journalist of something is off at the school, and how deep does this corruption run? But also some mystery, sort of why would a person do this? And specifically, I think what made this more interesting a story for me than like, one of a million kind of wild embezzlement banker stories, like I love The Wolf of Wall Street, but we kept saying this is not the Wolf of Wall Street. This is not a story of like a pure avatar of greed. There are great movies with that style and with that intention too. But what made it so interesting was that this guy who spent a life in education would do this, a guy who chose a profession from a very young age and remained super committed to that profession all the way through his life, that is extremely difficult, extremely not financially remunerative. He made a decent salary by the time he was running the school district. But, it's important in my script, I think, that he makes this point, like if I'd wanted to be a millionaire, I could have gone into banking. I could be living in country estates, just like you, Bob Spicer, Ray Romano's character. I felt for the character there. I think there is something about our, I am not an international enough person to truthfully say if it's specifically an American phenomenon or if it's a human phenomenon. But, I think even the most selfless of us, even those that really devote our lives to, the least greedy pursuits, still feel this pressure, this keeping up with the Joneses pressure, this pressure to sort of fundamentally demonstrate our worth through through how we're compensated. Our society is so structured around money as a stand-in for human worth. And so now I'm really going off on a philosophical tangent, but that's what was interesting to me about the story. And we did not want any single clear, whodunit answer about why he would do something like this, but we wanted the movie to sort of raise these pointed questions and leave the viewer at the end and kind of invite you with that final sequence and that final shot to think about what would push someone into this situation.
Yeah. So, Mike, you're also a producer on this film. And can you just talk about what that process is like, given that you're like with the writer producer as well, and what that entailed?
So when I decided that I wanted to write this, adapt this true story, I wasn't really collaborating with anyone else or being paid to write. It was very much like me just going back and forth to New York, seeking out my old teachers, contacting there was an article that had been written in New York Magazine that I think was the sort of most comprehensive and cinematic telling of the story at the time. It's called The Bad Superintendent, written by a guy named Bob Kolker. So one of my first steps was to just go and contact New York Magazine and be like, can I option the rights to this article? And really it was just, I think a lot of it was just sort of investing like in myself and my ability to tell the story. And to the extent that like, this was never a script that I like sold off to anyone else. It was always just sort of, I was kind of helping steer the ship creatively because, this wasn't a big studio movie, it was an independent film. So in terms of, finding, and Corey and, just even being involved kind of behind the scenes in our hometown. And like, most of the residences that we shot in, if it wasn't my mom's house, it was like my mom's tennis partner's house, or it was my friend from high school's mom's house. And like, there's just like a lot of like weird, or it's working with our production designer to really capture that time and place in 2004 and kind of just being there as the kind of regional safeguard for the film. I think that probably constitutes the majority of my producing on the film. But it in terms of, I recommend it to any writer who writes a really, really personal story, to be able to have a seat at the table creatively, and not just send it on down the aisle and we'll see you at the premiere. It was extremely exciting to be able to really have a voice throughout the process, in a producer sense as well.
Nice. And Corey, this one's for you. You started off in the theater, you're a playwright. That's actually how, we met. And I'm very curious from this, making that transition from just, going from theater, doing film, and just what that process was like. Those theater skills come into play at throughout this process. Do you apply any of that throughout, when you're making films?
Totally. I mean, I think I will always have like theatrical something or the other in my DNA. I think I still have like a love for a good solid like proscenium framing and just certain aspects of theater visually that I think probably, whether I want to or not, make their way into the way that I like to shoot. But it all started with me. That transition for me started with my last movie, Thoroughbreds, that Mike mentioned, which had been a play and was a play that I was fully intending to do as a play. But just in that mysterious, strange way that things happen, it sort of picked up steam and heat, the worst word in the world. It picked up heat in Hollywood before it picked up any heat in New York, in the playwriting world for whatever reason. Maybe the play wanted to be a movie.
Your star meter was.
What's that?
Your star meter, your IMDb star meter.
IMDb star meter. Good Lord. No, but it was a sorry, loud fire sirens going out my window. Apologies for that. But it was, and I had always wanted to direct. I had always loved some of the kind of more cinematic elements of theater. I'd always been really into like sound design in plays, and just I think was interested in genre in a way that might have been a more natural fit for film than for plays. None of this to bash theater. I still love plays. I'm still working on plays, but this that experience was so awesome. And the part that I really, really loved, in addition to working with actors, which is also a huge part of theater, obviously, was just being able to work with the camera, being able to move the camera, the collaboration with the DP, the lighting, just all of those aspects. I was really, really fond of that creative process. And so after that movie, after Thoroughbreds, I was looking at projects that I could write, and direct, and projects that I could just direct. And this was the one that just, of a sort of pile of scripts, this was the one that really caught my attention, felt like it really spoke to something deep inside me, something I wanted to explore, something I wanted to spend those, 2+ years that movies take to gestate with. So that's my long answer, but they're both great, and they both very much like inform one another, I think.
Yeah. Mike, did you do theater at any point, or was it always just screenwriting for you?
I always regretted that I never did, and at some point I'm gonna probably want to pick Corey's and your brain on because I think it would be really, really fun to dip into theater more. And for whatever reason, I just never. I took one playwriting class in college, but I think I was like, it was freshman year. I think I was high for most of it, unfortunately. But I do love theater. I see a lot of theater in LA where I live, but unfortunately, I don't know that I have been exposed to the sort of canon, the sort of breadth of amazing New York theater on and off Broadway. In a way that I feel like with films, like I'm such like a movie buff, and like I try to see everything so I know what I'm referencing. And in the theater world, I feel like I'd be flying a little more off the seat of my pants because I haven't read all the Pinter, unfortunately yet. Maybe you guys can give me some recommendations.
Yeah, it almost feels like the worlds are slowly starting to come together because of this situation we're in, with a lot of these theaters being done on Zoom, and I'm just hearing conversations I'm having with friends. It seems like everyone's like, how do I make the thing look good? And we're doing the stage, even though it's on this little small screen, but yeah.
I'm a huge immersive theater junkie, actually. I don't know if Corey knows that about me, but I've seen Sleep No More like 4 times.
My buddy was in it for a year.
Really? Who did he play? Was he like what was his role? Do you know?
I forget now. Wow. But
I feel like I've had one-on-one interactions with everyone. I've been fed soup in a shack. I've gone into a coat room. I got a lock it.
This would be a good time to announce the next chapter in our collaboration, which is the immersive bad education experience, where you become a student rather than high school. You walk through an entire school board meeting, and no, that would be horrendous. But
it's basically just my 7th grade experience. It's really fun. At the end, you get a bar mitzvah, and you cry in a coat closet. It's great.
Yeah. I'm getting word we gotta wrap it up, but before we do, Corey, I know you're not on social media, which is very smart of you. Mike, do you want to tell everyone how to follow you? Are you on Twitter?
Sure. I'm on the Twitter and Instagram. One is Mike Makowski and the other is Mike_Makowski, and I'm not totally sure which off the bat, but if you just put Mike Makowski in there, I'm sure I'll show up. I'd love to connect with folks.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you both for taking the time out of your day to do this. It is an amazing film. Again, congrats on the Emmy win, on the success of the film. I hope everyone checks it out. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure being here, and very honored to be invited.